participants to join us. My name is Lisa Unander, and I'm the Education Director at the Long Island Museum, and co-hosting today.
My name is Kristin Cuomo, and I'm the Senior Educator at the Long Island Museum. I'm happy to be here with you.
We're very happy to be part of the Middle Country Public Library's International Museum Day, virtual style this year. On the screen that you are looking at, that we're going to leave here for a few minutes while our audience joins, are some supplies that you're going to need for the second part of today's program. As with a lot of programs that maybe you've been participating in during these last few weeks, we did our best to have general household supplies, and there are substitutions that we will recommend. So if you do not have everything you see here, please don't worry. You can make your own alternate version, and we'll have some tips for you. But also, this will be being recorded and able to access at any time with the video portion, as well as a PDF of the lesson on the Long Island Museum's website. We'll give you all that information later, so you can really go through this at whatever pace is going to work for you for the project. You can watch now, enjoy, get some tips, and then come back to it later if that's easiest for your family. So Kristin, I know you have the chat box up on your screen. If there's any questions coming in, you can fill me in as we go. If not, should we get started with our first slide?
Yeah, I think we can get going.
Okay. So once again, we want to welcome you officially to International Museum Day at the Middle Country Public Library. And once again, we're coming to you from home, but representing the Long Island Museum in Stony Brook. Today's program is going to be focusing on William Sidney Mount, and we have a photograph of him up on the screen right now from about 1855. And on the bottom of the screen, we have a drawing there of a fiddle, but a particular fiddle that he worked on that we'll talk about more later as well. And we're just going to today be talking about William Sidney Mount as an artist, as well as William Sidney Mount as a musician. So I'm going to move to our next slide here to get us started. So a little bit of information, maybe some of our visitors have been to our museum before in Stony Brook, and some of our school children may have attended our one-room schoolhouse program or a program in our carriage museum, or maybe you've come as a family to our grounds to see sculptures or to our art museum. If you've been to our art museum, you may have seen some of William Sidney Mount's paintings there on view. He was an artist who lived in Stony Brook, and he painted scenes of Long Island life about over 150 years ago. And in today's lesson, we're going to see some of his paintings to kind of inspire us and see what themes were really important to William Sidney Mount. And one of them, kind of as I hinted at in the beginning, is music. And because music today is so important to many of us, and I hope we'll be able to talk a little bit about that, music has been important for centuries. Children and adults learned to play instruments on special occasions, just like we do today. People would sing and dance and play musical instruments. They did it in very different ways, but again, still a lot of the same ideas. And not only was Mount an artist, as in a painting artist, which we'll see his paintings, he was also a musician. He made music, he wrote music, and he actually even designed a certain type of the fiddle, which you saw a picture of in the beginning. So he was sort of an artist in the bigger sense. So a few just questions to think about as we continue through our program is, how is music a part of your lives? And do any of you play an instrument? And when you have a celebration, any sort of holiday, is there music involved? Is there dancing with your family? Try and think about how music plays a role in your everyday life. And you can talk about that with your family at home or the adult who is with you, and come up with some thoughts about that. So here we have a self-portrait, and also in today's program, we're going to have a little bit of an introduction to some basic art terms that you will be seeing throughout today's program. So this is called Self-Portrait with Flute from 1828, and if you were able to see it in real life, it is an oil painting on a wooden panel. And self-portrait is a picture that an artist creates of themselves. What an artist holds in a self-portrait is usually really telling. It tells a little bit about them. So why do you think that William Sidney Mount included the flute in this portrait, knowing a little what we learned about him before? And if you were going to paint a portrait of yourself, think about what item you might include. What could tell us about yourself? So if it's something, if you like sports, maybe you have a baseball bat in your portrait. If you really like to read, maybe you're carrying a book in your portrait. So you can kind of notice clues like that from artists and think about it. I bet you've made a self-portrait before, whether it's pencil on paper, markers, crayons, paint, whatever the medium. I bet you've tried this out. You can try and see what you put in your hands to do that. Yes, Kristin.
Yeah, we have one answer here from Andy. He said he would carry a video game console in his self-portrait.
That's excellent. Thank you, Andy. And that would tell us for our 2020 year here, that would be something a child could actually carry, and it would tell us that you enjoy playing your video games. Thank you for sharing. Excellent. So we're going to another picture now. And this one isn't a self-portrait, but it is a regular portrait. And that is when an artist creates something that shows what someone else looks like. So just as you would choose those items that were special to you, maybe the person you were making the portrait of would choose something special to wear to be shown in your portrait, or something that they were holding, or an activity, or maybe even the setting in a special place that they were. So if you can think about that, if you were going to paint a picture maybe of a brother or sister, or a parent, or even a pet, what you might give them to hold or wear, any choices there. We have the gentleman in this painting holding a fiddle, but also wearing those certain clothing. Okay.
And Lisa, we have another answer. If William was doing a self-portrait, he would carry a Lego. And if William was doing a portrait like this or having his portrait done, he would wear fancy clothes like his bow tie.
Oh, William, that is fantastic. And I love the idea of kind of two different ways in which you would want to present yourself. That's wonderful. I'd like to see, maybe you can make one, maybe beyond our other craft that we're doing. That would be a great follow-up activity for any of our families to do at home, would be to try out what your portrait, your self-portrait would look like, or maybe you can get someone to agree in your household to sit for a study so you could do a portrait of them. Excellent. So looking at this portrait, just before I move on, this gentleman has a fiddle in his hand. He's dressed quite nicely. I think definitely some kind of a performance. And if any of you play instruments and have had a chance to be in a school concert or anything like that, often you wear kind of a button down and sort of nicer clothing to be able to, you know, have a professional look and present yourself there as a serious musician. All right, so this page, this is not a painting that Mount did. It is something that his own hand transcribed. And that is a word that means that he would write down the musical notes to what were already popular songs. So this particular one is even a step above that. This is not a copy of a popular song. This is an actual song that William Sidney Mount wrote and created himself. It was called "In the Cars of the Long Island Railroad." And if we look at the very top there, when we think about artists, we have the artist's name, the title of the work, as I said, then we have a date. And this one says 1850. And then we have what the item actually is. It's ink, pen on paper. So 1850, and I'm saying the cars of the Long Island Railroad, so you can gain the history as well from this, that even that long ago, the Long Island Railroad that we all know today was operating. A little different, but it was operating. So William Sidney Mount liked to spend a lot of his time doing his own copies. We didn't have you know, computers obviously to print out PDFs of sheet music back then, and you could go to stores and buy things like this, but this would be a pretty common hobby for a musician. So they'd have their own copies when you go to a barn dance, say, and want to play music along with everyone. To have your own transcription would be important. So looking at this music, if we have any musicians out there who do any music reading, but looking at the notes, do we think this maybe sounded fast or slow? Do we think it may have sounded loud or soft? And imagine what it might sound like. And we do have a special option today that Kristin is going to give us a little clip of what that actually would sound like. So I'm going to skip that.
And just before I play it, we have one answer. Someone thinks it would sound super fast. So let's see if that is true.
Excellent. Stop my share. Sorry, I couldn't get my thing. So wonderful. So our friend who said they thought it sounded fast, you were absolutely correct with that. And I've heard other people say it kind of sounds like people hurrying along a bit, maybe thinking about that commute. Even back then, weren't as many people as we have today, but certainly in some of the areas with limited transportation, I think it's a good sound. And something William Sidney Mount, I said, grew up, lived, Stony Brook, Setauket area, but he made a lot of trips into New York City. So having that idea of what trains and carriages and steamships, the type of transportation he would have had available then, he would have probably been influenced by that for his writing. Excellent. I'm going to get back to our wonderful. So moving ahead. So more focusing on music, we have two images here. On the very far left, we have a music stand that was made by William Sidney Mount, and it says oil on wood. And on the right-hand side, we have an image of what he called the cradle of harmony. And that was his fiddle or violin. I know Kristin will chat about those words a little bit. That was a fiddle that he actually designed. He didn't create fiddles, they've been around for a really long time, but he used his fiddle so much at barn dances. And if you think of a barn dance, do we think it would be a quiet place, like if you went to sit and watch a musical performance in a concert hall? Or do we think it would be a little bit more of a loud, kind of informal place? We're gonna have farmers, we're gonna have clapping, stomping feet. It was usually pretty loud. And William Sidney Mount liked the fiddle to be able to be heard above all of the other music. So he actually sort of tinkered around and created a design of a different shape that allowed that fiddle to be heard a little bit louder. And this was what we call the cradle of harmony. And that first image we had was a patent that he actually received. So he was, a designer and an inventor on top of everything else. The music stand. If we look at it from here, and if I didn't know it so close because I've seen it on display in our museum, it looks like he has his sheet music, a little scattered, kind of ready to play. If you really were there to see it in person, that music is painted onto the music stand here. So it is not actually paper, it's oil paint painted right on there. There's something else unique about this music stand. If you look at all four sides, you can see there is space for 4 different musicians who have had some of their music propped up. So it's very much sort of a welcoming community feel, that the type of music that William Sidney Mount was used to playing and the areas he was used to playing were usually these more informal gatherings, barn dances and things like that. And he kind of created this really interesting, it's a piece of art, but it's also functional to use as a music stand there. So if any of our friends are out there, I said William's desire to kind of make one of his favorite instruments, this fiddle, louder, kind of brought him to come up with this cradle of harmony. If anyone out there has another instrument that they really like, does anyone want to share a favorite kind of instrument, or think about it with your family of your favorite instrument?
Andy and Will have written that they would really like that music stand or the cradle of harmony for the two of them.
Because you could each share it, and depending what instruments they play, they could really complement each other playing it together. That's wonderful.
Wow. One of them plays the trombone.
Okay, well, excellent. I love this.
Get a concert going on both sides of the music stand.
It's a great piece.
And one wants to learn to play the cello, so they would sound beautiful together.
Oh, they would work really well together. And instruments that are, again, some of these instruments are going back many centuries. You know, from William Sidney Mount's time to now, we've added a few, maybe electric guitars and synthesizers, electric drums, but most of the instruments that our families and children are going to play, especially in their school concerts, most of those were ones that William Sidney Mount's time absolutely would have had them, and much before then as well. Before I turn it over to Kristin, I mentioned a few times in the slides of if we were, in person at the museum, which I know we are not able to be at this time, but hopefully in the future when things are reopening, we very often have pieces of William Sidney Mount's on view at the museum. So if it's something that seemed interesting or you'd love to see kind of what the actual paintings look, not just on the screen, but in real life, that's something at the very end. We're going to have some information about our website and where you can learn more. And again, we hope to welcome you a little bit in the future. I'm going to turn it over to Kristin.
Wonderful. So I'm going to take it over from this slide here, which is beginning to talk about building your own violin. Now, before we start to talk about building instruments, I'd like to go back to what Lisa mentioned before. She mentioned a violin a few times and she mentioned a fiddle a few times. And if you don't play violin or fiddle, you might think that these are two different instruments. They are actually the same instrument. So if you play a violin, you take the instrument and you play classical music on it or other types of music like that. And if you play folk music or bluegrass music or a lot of different traditional musics from different countries like traditional Irish music, then you play that violin as a fiddle. So it's the same instrument, it just has to do with the way that you tune it and the way that you play it for different types of music. So when William Sidney Mount was playing for a barn dance, he was most likely playing his violin as a fiddle, which is why Lisa said fiddle before. So now I'm going to talk about building your own instruments. And as Lisa said before, violins have been around for a long time, since much before William Sidney Mount's time. And people have been making instruments themselves for many thousands of years. We have a lot of ancient artifacts of instruments that people built tens of thousands of years ago. When we come to William Sidney Mount's time, people were still making their own instruments. Even though you could go to a store and buy a violin from someone, a lot of people were not able to get to a store to buy a violin, or maybe they didn't have the money to buy a violin, or maybe they just like to build things themselves. Does anyone at home like to build anything themselves? I bet you do. Sometimes you can get the directions or the plans to build something. So on this slide, we see something from the 1920s, a little bit after William Sidney Mount's time, and it's showing people at home. It's from a magazine that people who like to build would get, called Popular Mechanics, and it actually showed people how to build instruments from some different things that they might have had around their house. And then down on the bottom of this slide, we have an instrument that is actually from just after William Sidney Mount's time in the 1800s, and it is a cigar box guitar. A lot of times people called instruments that they made at home in the 1800s and 1900s cigar box instruments. And that's because that box that the instrument is made out of used to have cigars in it. And they tended to be made out of wood, and they were sturdy, and they were a good size to make your own instrument. So we thought that it would be fun today to make our own instrument using a box. We don't have any cigar boxes in my house, but I have a few other boxes that I can show you. So Lisa, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide. Perfect. So we had this up in the beginning, and these are some different materials that you might be able to use. If you don't have the materials right now, you can always come back and watch this video again on the Middle Country Library's YouTube page, and you can follow step by step. You'll also be able to find this lesson as a PDF document on the museum's website, and we'll have that posted as well. If you want to follow step by step without watching a video, that's fine too. But I'm going to go ahead now and spend about 10 minutes showing you how you can build your own instrument with some materials that you might have at home. Thanks, Lisa. So here I am in my home. I'm sitting at my kitchen table. I like to craft at my kitchen table when I'm at home. And I have some different materials spread out. The first thing that I'm going to show you is the box that we'll use. So I'm going to point my camera down this way. And you want to use a box that is a rectangle and that's not so big that you're not going to be able to stretch rubber bands or strings around it. So I have a macaroni and cheese box. I feel like that's a really good size. Another box that might be a good size would be like a rice box or maybe a pasta box. But for today, I'm going to use this macaroni and cheese box. The most important thing is to make sure that you don't have any food in the box anymore. So my sons already ate the macaroni and cheese out of the inside of this. It was super yummy. And now we can use the box to make a fiddle. The first thing you're going to want to do is make sure that the top of your box is open. And right here, where the top of your box meets the front of your box, if you can kind of see where it would bend right there, we're going to make a little cut with our scissors. We are going to cut about 1 inch or so across. And the reason that we're going to make that cut is because an instrument has 2 main parts, an instrument like a violin. It has the body, and then it has what we call the neck. And that's the part of the instrument that will have the string stretched on it so that it can make noise. I'm going to use a paint stick for the neck of my instrument, but if you're working from home, you can use anything that is long and skinny and strong like this. You could use a ruler if you have one at home. I chose this ruler because it broke and we can't use it to measure anymore. You could also use a strong piece of cardboard or even a popsicle stick. But basically, the first step is going to be to cut a hole right here so that you can stick the stick safely into the box and create the body and the neck of your instrument. This is something you probably want to have an adult help you with because you need to use scissors to poke a hole in the box. You're going to poke a hole kind of right there, and I'm just going to cut across about 1 inch or so that I can fit my paint stick inside. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take my paint stick and I am going to make sure I can get in that hole there. And I'm going to, if you see what I'm doing, I'm sticking my paint stick all the way inside my box. That's going to make my box extra strong, and it's going to give me some space to put my strings. Now, this is really important. If I don't secure this, my stick is going to move around. So I want to go inside my box, and I have a flashlight here to show you what it looks like. You want to go inside the box and actually put a piece of tape so that you can secure that. So I'm going to use masking tape for most things in this project. I mean duct tape rather, because duct tape is very strong and sturdy. If you don't have duct tape at home, in the slide there were some other tapes that you can use. You could use masking tape or packing tape. You can even use Scotch tape, but if you're using Scotch tape, I would use a lot of pieces to make sure that everything is nice and strong. So I'm going to take a piece of my duct tape here, and I'm actually going to stick it inside my box to make sure that my paint stick is nice and secure to the inside of my box. I might even use 2 pieces of tape. And when I'm done with this, I'm going to show you what it looks like. If you have smaller hands than me, this will be even easier for you at home. My hands are kind of big. So now I'm going to show you what it looks like inside. Can you see how I put the tape? And now my stick doesn't wiggle around anymore. It is nice and secure. There we go. Now, the next step is going to be to close my box and secure the ends of it. Now that my stick is inside, I'm going to fold down the flaps of my box so that it looks like it's closed again. And again, I'm going to use some nice strong tape, and I am going to tape it closed, just like that. So now my box is closed, it's taped shut. I might even use another piece of tape down here on the bottom to make sure that the bottom flap is nice and secure. And now my box is nice and sturdy and ready to decorate. The next step is to decorate your box. Now, if you think that macaroni and cheese looks cool on the front, you can leave it just the way it is. Sometimes when people made cigar box instruments, the cigar boxes had nice designs on them and they left them the way they were. Today, I think I might use some paper and some tape to decorate the front of my box so that it looks like a fiddle or a violin. So the first thing I'm going to do is take a marker or a pencil, and I'm going to measure how big my box is by drawing some lines on the side, just like that. And now I'm going to use my scissor, and I'm going to cut it out. When I cut it, I'm actually going to cut it on the inside of my lines to make it a little bit smaller than what I measured. That way my paper doesn't stick off my box when I attach it. Now at home, if you don't want to use paper to decorate your box, you could use markers or you could use paint. If you paint your box, you just want to make sure that the paint is dry before you go on to the next step. So does that look like it fits well? I think that's good. I might just trim the end a little bit. And now I am going to go ahead and draw a picture of what I think a fiddle looks like. You can let me know how I did. Maybe something like that. There we go. Perfect. And if you don't draw it perfect the first time, you can always try again. That's the great thing about art. So now I'm going to take my picture and I'm going to use some packing tape this time because it's nice and clear and it won't cover my picture the way the duct tape would. And I'm just going to tape it onto the front of my box. So now it looks a little bit more like an instrument. Now I have a body and a design and a neck for my instrument. The last step is to put strings on an instrument because strings are what make stringed instruments sound so beautiful. Guitars and fiddles and banjos, all these types of instruments have strings on them, and they are the things that you pluck or rub to make sound. So to put strings on a fiddle, you need one more part besides the body and the neck. You need something right here in the middle called a bridge. And the bridge is going to hold the strings up so that they can resonate and make sound. For the bridge, you are going to need a strong piece of cardboard. This came from a mailing box that something was mailed to my house in. And you're going to want to cut the cardboard so that it fits right here in the middle of your instrument. So I'm going to cut a piece about that big. And I think that's perfect. And then you're going to also cut 2 more pieces for the sides, the same size. They are going to support that bridge. The last step for the bridge is to take it and make notches right here for the strings to lay in. And the way that you make notches is very simple. Again, you can have an adult help you with the scissors, and you are going to cut some little triangles. If you can see what I'm doing, I cut little triangles out of the top of my bridge. I'm going to cut 3 triangle notches. Most violins or fiddles will have 4 strings, although some people who play them like fiddles put 5 strings on. But my violin is not very big, so I think 3 strings is perfect. And now what you're going to want to do is use some tape and some glue to make sure that your bridge can stand up and hold your strings up. I'm going to cut my bridge a little smaller so that it doesn't stick up too much. And I think that that is perfect, if you can see that. So now I'm going to use some glue. I like to use tacky glue, but if you have Elmer's glue or wood glue or hot glue at home, you can use anything. I like to dump my glue on a piece of paper or a plate when I'm working with it. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put some glue on the side of my bridge that does not have the notches. I'm going to put some glue and I'm going to glue it down just like that. And then I'm going to put some glue on the 2 support pieces and put 1 piece on that side of the bridge and put 1 piece on that side of the bridge. Now, if you let this dry overnight, it will probably be super strong, but since I'm working kind of fast to make it extra strong, I think that I will just put a little bit of tape on it as well to make sure that everything stays stuck just the way it needs to be when I put my strings on. And then I am ready for my last step. So now I have a bridge and I can put my strings on. For my strings, I am going to use very stretchy rubber bands. When you get a rubber band, you want to make sure that it's stretchy enough to stretch around your whole box without breaking. And you might want to ask an adult to help you in case the rubber band snaps, it might hurt you. What you're going to want to do is stretch your rubber band around the bottom. So my bridge fell out a little bit, no big deal. When it dries, it will be stronger. And then you're going to stretch it over one of those notches and then over the top of your neck. So now I'm going to stretch 2 more, but actually I'm going to show you one more thing in case you don't have rubber bands at home. I'm going to stretch one more rubber band like that. So now I have 2 strings. But in case you don't have rubber bands at home and you want to use something like string or maybe lanyard, I'm going to show you how to do that. So if you're using a real piece of string, you're pretty much going to do the same thing. You're going to stretch that string right over the notch and over the top of the neck, and you're going to stretch it to the back of your instrument, and you're going to tie it. And then since string is not stretchy and it might fall off, after you tie your string, you might want to put a little piece of tape on it too to make sure that it stays stuck. And now you can cut your extra string, and now you have a fiddle. You want to make sure that that stays up. You might have to play with that and secure it a little more. Now you have your box fiddle, and you can see how the neck is keeping the strings up, the bridge is keeping the strings up right there. And the last step is to try to play your fiddle. Now, if it were a cigar box or a box guitar, you would pluck your strings with your fingers. But since it is a fiddle or a violin, you want to use a bow to rub against your strings. I just found a stick in my backyard. You can do the same thing, or you could even get a chopstick or a pencil from your house, and you can try to bow back and forth. And you see my strings make a little bit of noise. So you could even play around with different materials and see if you use different materials, if they make different noises or different pitches. And that's how you make your box instrument. So now I'm going to send the slideshow back to Lisa for our last slide so we can finish.
Thank you, Kristin. And as I mentioned, you'll be able to go through and see the steps that Kristin just demonstrated by visiting the at-home lessons on the Long Island Museum's website, which you see here is longislandmuseum.org. If you had fun with us today, or if you made a fiddle along with us, or we'll be doing so right after, you kind of get your ideas, we would love to have a chance to see some of your creations. So we have ways to post those on both the Long Island Museum and Middle Country Library's Instagram and Facebook pages. We have the information down there, as you will see. And we really thank you for joining us today for this lesson and this craft. We hope it inspired you to maybe learn a little bit more about our artist, William Sidney Mount. And also, if you're the kind of kid out there or adult who sometimes likes a lot, doesn't have a favorite, like, you know, you love music, you love art, you love dancing, you love sewing, you don't always have to just pick one. You can kind of keep exploring, and a lot of times, like we see our painter William Sidney Mount did, that's what he's known for, being a painter, but he certainly never let that, his love of music, he never let that slip. He found ways to incorporate it into his visual art. He found ways to embrace the music aspect of it. So a lot of times it's that interesting combination of you know, love of art and science together, or math and writing together, all different ways that you could come up with, you know, your own creative expression. This video also will be posted on the Middle Country Library's YouTube page. So you'll be able to refer back there if you need some quick little tips at all from Kristin. And if anyone has any other questions before we finish off today, and if not, we are really, again, happy that you joined us. And I know the library has a long list of other programs that are still on the schedule today that go even up through the later evening. I was eyeing a few myself, so I hope you'll be checking back to see what else you can participate in today.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you so much. Bye.